Matt, would you like to introduce our first guest? I'm very excited to talk with her.
Absolutely. So Colonel Candice Frost is commander of the Joint Intelligence Operations Center at U.S. Cyber Command. Today, we're going to hear from her on her view of insights of today's cyber threat environment. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Matt. Colonel Frost, welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
It's really nice to have you here. We very much appreciate it. We know that you are one of the most innovative thinkers at Cyber Command. No offense to all of your very talented colleagues, of course, but you found a way to join us while on the road, which we very much appreciate. How much sort of dedication.
I'm always here to share.
Thank you so much. I thought we might start this afternoon with just kind of your general thoughts on the view from Cyber Command, really looking for just insights on today's threat environment.
Absolutely. And I think, when we are looking at today's threat environments, we really need to look at the present, our big four that we're looking at, and then eventually into the future. So the National Defense Strategy, let's hit up the heavy hitter right now. Really, they have looked at China as the military pacing challenge. This comes as no surprise to any of your listeners who follow your great updates that you give every day. But we are looking at the competition that the PRC has had and how that's taken it on to really a global scale. We know that PRC, the latest time General Nakasone briefed Congress, they sponsored cyber actors, and they really represent a growing sophistication and threat to both the United States and our allies' interests. Next, I'd be remiss not to miss Russia and the actions that we've seen them have in Ukraine and really elsewhere. The National Defense Strategy calls Russia an acute threat to free and open global systems, and noting that Moscow really does flout their international norms with destabilizing actions. Within the intelligence and the cyber world, they're skilled and persistent, just as China is. And so we've tried to manipulate and make sure that our organizations are very rapidly reacting to both Russia, but then also keeping the bulk of it focused on China. I'd be remiss, though, not to mention Iran and the enduring commitment that we have had in Cyber Command to deterring the aggression in the Middle East, and then, of course, promoting that stability in East Asia. Iran does work as a major destabilizer in their region, and then we've also seen their attempt to really use their malicious cyber activity, both on their neighbors, but also against the US in the midterm elections. And last but not least, North Korea and the actions that they've taken in their regime and the use that they have taken towards stealing cryptocurrency. So when I look at the big four, those are the heavy hitters that I see out there, with the first two being the bulk of the effort. But I'd really be remiss not to mention those non-state actors, whether they're proxy actors executed by actors in Russia or elsewhere in other domains, really cyber criminals. And the fact that we have seen such an increase in the amount of phishing. In some areas, we've seen an increase in the last year of 240% in phishing emails. So we have to be cognizant of, we are focused on main state actors, but we've got to look at those criminals out there that are also really, really digging into our systems and frankly, just stealing from people that are doing the right thing in this space.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much to really dig in on there. Let me ask you first, we've been focusing a lot at the Cypher Brief on the situation in Ukraine and how alliances are really shaping the new global world order. So you just mentioned China, Russia, and Iran as being kind of top of radar for Cyber Command. Now that you're seeing a stronger alliance among those three countries when it comes to the situation in Ukraine, are you seeing a difference or an uptick in some of the cyber capabilities that each of them has? Is there an opportunity for them to organize these their capabilities in ways that will bring different kind of threat?
So there are always opportunities. I would say what we have seen, though, where Russia is particularly focused on, and then where China has focused. China is definitely watching the Russia-Ukraine activity and learning, whereas Russia has continued to focus on their ability to target critical infrastructures. We know underwater cables, industrial control systems, those are areas, and China is taking note. And I think that's the most important. Iran learned a tremendous amount from Russia and the work that they had done during the 2016 elections, and then what we saw in the midterm as stated by General Nakasone in front of Congress. So we see this area of learning from each other And that's considerable with the fact that this space is so rapidly evolving and changing. That learning could really have an impact.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the learning component of this, and it may be one step back from actually organizing what they're doing, but something definitely worth watching. I'm really interested in convergence on a number of levels. You also mentioned that the proxy groups, that you can't really ignore the fact that they're being used in different ways. The phishing statistic was eye-opening for me, but well, you talked about criminals. So I know, just speaking with colleagues at the Department of Justice over the past couple of years, that they were really noting an uptick in convergence between nation states and criminal actors. Is that something that you're still seeing more coordination among those two groups?
I think we definitely see it in both the money laundering arena and then financial crimes. Obviously, we know professional money launderers, that they've started to become the gatekeepers to, it's almost a professionalization of those cyber criminals that are going forward. They have accountants, lawyers, notaries. I mean, when you start to professionalize a business based on crime, that really is a stark reminder to the rest of us that just how much this has grown. Additionally, those high impact ransomware attacks, that ability to execute that, coupled with where they're targeting in different areas. And I think it's notable the exposure of sensitive data all the way down to hospitals and now even schools. That's substantive in the fact that those easier to hit areas have really exponentially increased in the last year. And cybersecurity really is a marathon. It's not a sprint, but we've got to be wary that as it continues to grow, that lengthens the marathon beyond 26.2 miles. And we've just got to continue to not only drink water, but also get a little help from those around us, because unlike a race where you're going by yourself, cybersecurity is a team sport. And we've had a lot of players work together. I've got to say, and when we look at cooperation across the plane, we have seen substantive work with obviously NSA and Cyber Command working hand in glove together, but also the DOJ, specifically the FBI, and the great work that CISA has done. I personally got to see that working during the midterm elections, but it happens every single day to even the team level. It's pretty impressive.
You know, one of the actors that we talked about today that we're going to be talking about a lot more today is Russia. I wonder, how does it sort of does it hit the radar of the Cyber Command anywhere when you talk about disinformation campaigns and you look at the upcoming election? And Russia's, I mean, they're really good at launching disinformation campaigns and at making Americans angry at each other. Are you worried about this at Cyber Command?
Russia does, and we are worried about it. Russia does present one of the most serious foreign threats when we're looking at influence on the United States. And, you know, China again is watching this. Those influence actors have really injected themselves into the most contentious of our United States issues. Think of us, you know, as and the political matters to even grow wider and wider. So we are very aware. We obviously were aware of the elections and the malign influence setting up for the 2024 elections. Even right now in 2023, we're looking forward to make sure that we can combat and make sure that that is downplayed as much as possible. But Russia is an actor that has really worked to hide their hand, and their influence that they've been able to maneuver in this space, they've laundered those messages through Russian proxies. Whereas they were a little more professional, we've been able to kind of strike at that. What we have seen is how they've been able to maneuver in different areas. It just makes it harder, but we'll be able to hopefully work with private industry to notify and let people know what they're reading. I think that's the most important part, that we saw those shifts in social media, and that goes to the private industry and how they've worked together with us. I've seen great gains in that, and I hope that that continues as we maneuver forward in this ever evolving and changing landscape of both media and social media spaces.
Yeah, for sure. Brad mentioned in our kind of briefing of news off the top that Elon Musk is one of, I think, close to 1,000 signatories on this letter, stating we all need to take a pause on AI for a moment because it can be potentially very dangerous, and none of us really understands how AI is going to be impacting the future world. Is this something you spend a lot of time thinking about as well?
I think less so in my current position at Cyber Command right now. I'm also an instructor, and I do think about the impacts of ChatGPT and what it will have on papers and how to go about that. But there are justices to this as well, and I think that's an area. Although we have to look at the whole scope of how it will impact. It's really hard to stop progress. And so how do we maneuver within this space to make sure that we're bringing in people that understand ethics, philosophers? That's where I always try to encourage people that may not be so technical to come into this space, because they are needed underneath this tent to ensure that we are doing the right thing when we create systems and use them for the future. So again, stopping that train, it's already left the station. That's going to be pretty hard.
My own personal opinion, I think it's easy to say that the US should do something like this, but adversaries won't always do something like this, because as you referred to with your philosophical hat on, we're living in a values-based democracy, very, very different. Okay, so some of the major targets in the past from whether nation states, criminal groups, you mentioned banks, North Korea has been quite active in sort of criminal activity. What are you sort of seeing if we were to look forward? If I were to ask you to predict, which everyone does and you can't do, but we ask you anyway, when we talk about North Korea, Iran, Russia, China, let's break it down by each country. So North Korea, where do you see the trajectory of their activity in cyber going?
So I think they've got a real niche area in the crypto space, and despite the fluctuations over the past year in value itself, that's an area that they need to fund all sorts of operations in their country. That is a huge part of their income stream. So I don't see that changing very much. I see them still relying on that to be a part of really their GDP and how they bring funds into their country. Again, they're also outsourced for bringing in remits and working outside of their country to bring money back to families. So just being aware and cognizant of the people that you hire. I tell people, just be very cognizant if it's work from home, making sure that you're really getting someone that's not from North Korea to help you in your software development.
I mean, that's such a great point, because insider threat is difficult enough to detect when you're all working in the same building sometimes, right? Because you're really trying to detect someone's intentions, which is much easier to hide. So I don't want to go down a rabbit hole too much, but I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear if you have some tips on, how Cyber Command looks at guarding against things like that when so many of us are working remotely.
Right. I think, not necessarily Cyber Command is one that is maneuvering forward, but I know CISA does a great job at kind of the public information campaign of making sure that people that you hire in the information domain, especially in software development, are who they say they are. And of course, again, it's always those security professionals that work with you. It's check and double check your workforce. That'll help you out. And opening the space where if somebody's like, this just doesn't seem right, making it very easy for them to talk to somebody in HR to say, the hair on the back of my neck is standing up with this employee. Let it be known. And that helps, when we're on this as a community, it really does.
Yeah, instincts actually do matter. I believe that as well. Okay, I want to get us back on track. I just couldn't resist asking that question, but let's talk about the future trajectory. Iran. I don't think that Iran has always been a major destabilizer. I think both in cyber, physically, in areas, particularly in Europe, where the U.S. is present. How do you see they've now started contributing like drones and other technologies to Russia for the war in Ukraine? What kind of trajectory do you see Iran on at this point in time?
I think Iran is still, the biggest agitator in the Middle East. And although they are, we've seen trade because of Russia's economy truly being locked down on every single piece, kit, and component, and definitely chips. Microchips are incredibly important for a lot of warfare-like systems. That shut off to the ability to get that has caused strange bedfellows. And with Iran and the work that they've done, projecting forward for them, I still think that at the end of the day, they're willing to be a partner just to an extent in the fact that they've got their own regional issues that they've they've always got to maintain a focus and care about.
Yeah. Russia, I mean, this is maybe a hard one or an easy one. I don't know which. Given their campaign in Ukraine, has it taken their attention off of some of the more sort of persistent threats that we've seen in the past in cyber?
So I think when we look at, you know, their ability to kind of use this space to grow, they still have their proxy actors that are out there, but like anything, right? If a proxy actor is being called to the front line, they're not in front of the keyboard. And so you've got already, if you just look at the trajectory of their population, you've already got a decline and a growing aging population. This is impacting that as well. So there are many different things that they'll have to eventually, you know, choose guns or butter. They're going to have to face that decision. But at the end of the day, never discount Russia. I mean, history has absolutely taught us when you think that this country has reached its limits, it absolutely hasn't. Just look at World War II and the impact that that country really did have on it. We have to be very cognizant of the fact that being able to pull people from different areas, the budget itself, and the impact of what their primary export is, it still has a little bit of an influence in the world, and we've got to pay attention to that.
All right, let's talk about China, and then I'm going to open it up to some questions. So everyone is looking at Ukraine and thinking, how might China be watching, be paying attention when it comes to the issue of Taiwan? Are you seeing changes that you're able to talk about when it comes to how China may be using the cyberspace and technology for whatever its future action will be in Taiwan?
I would say they're watching with an eye towards what's gone on in Russia, Ukraine. Absolutely, the events that are happening. But they've also looked at, hey, what happens when those economic levers were turned up on Russia? And China still has that ever-present concern with their supply chain when it comes to semiconductors, minerals, batteries. I mean, they are really gripping a hold of the solar panels, almost to the fact that they have a chokehold on the market, and then pharmaceuticals as well. So they understand how they'd have to maneuver and grow in different areas in the cyberspace, absolutely. But where can they start to invest in? We are absolutely seeing that, so that the work that she has tried to do with respect to China 2025 and semiconductors. And by the way, the Chip War by, I think, Chris Miller is one great book to read for your listeners. And the other one is The Wires of War by Jacob Hellberg. Those are two phenomenal books that I've read lately that really, I think, grasp at what these issues are and longitudinally have us look forward into where those areas that China could really, that are unique to only China, that they could maneuver in, especially in the world that we live focused on cybersecurity and cyberspace.
Yeah, those are two excellent books. We'll put those in the chat box too for folks. Let me stop being so greedy with all of your time and just introduce a couple of questions quickly here from the audience, and then I'll come to you for some closing thoughts if that's okay. But Kimberly Madden has a question. She says, have there been any counter-influence campaigns running to counteract the disinformation coming out of Russia? And she wants to know how you think we get ahead of this.
So I think the administration has done a really good job in trying to reshape some of the organizations that focus on malign influence. It's just an incredibly tough arena to work in. So obviously the operations that we do, we focus primarily external on defensive operations to make sure our own military networks are safe, and then also for the safety of the nation and our critical infrastructure. There are many other organizations that kind of move forward and target mis and disinformation, and they're much better at it than maybe the Department of Defense is. And I think the messaging we've seen from our State Department, the work that they have done to truly expose some of these areas, and even the IC at the start of Russia-Ukraine, the fact of downgrading intelligence and information is really a precedent we had not seen in years, to expose the narrative that Russia was going to put forward about Ukraine. I think that's very telling of how this current administration is maneuvering forward to try and let people know what truth is out there and how Russia is attempting to manipulate it.
Yeah. In closing, I think most of the people on this call today understand that CISA is sort of the main point of contact between the public and private sectors when it comes to cyber and protection. I just wanted to close with kind of any information you can give us about how businesses can interact with the NSA and how they would, what resources are available for that collaboration within Cyber Command NSA.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Suzanne. I appreciate it. The Cyber Collaboration Center is really, when we look at the functional area and the target and the belly button, that organization has stood up and really serves to work with the defense industrial base, both sub and prime, to make sure that they are staying safe and secure in this arena. They do a tremendous amount to help companies out. And we're having forthcoming changes. So those changes that were just ideal are now becoming a reality, and to make sure that your networks are safe and secure to work with and either contract with the government or have a product that services the government. It's really important to dive into that organization. They will help you out, absolutely. And then the JCDC is another kind of collaborative effort that CISA's maneuvered forward to work with the larger, writ large society of those people that operate and work in this space. So it's great to see that, but at the end of the day, it's all about awareness, and getting the message out will really help others.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Colonel Candice Frost, it's so kind of you. I know you're on the go today. I think you're always on the go. I really want to appreciate you taking the time to help walk us through sort of the view from Cyber Command. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, and enjoy the rest of the conference, everyone.
Thank you.
The Cypher Brief, because national security is everyone's business.